Justin and I are going to discuss the details. Well, before I start, do you know how many times President Trump said that the Iranians want a deal? They want a deal. They're really urging for a deal. They're pushing for a deal. 39 times. 39 times. So on Sunday, on President Trump's birthday, I guess maybe it's because it was his birthday, he wanted to push so badly towards a deal that he actually, this MOU, this Memorandum of Understanding, the reason it's understanding because it's not understandings. So this is only one side, like American side. You don't see the Iranian side. So they're supposed to sign the agreement on Friday in Switzerland, but Justin just told me that President Trump already signed it. Justin?
Hey, so it's exactly that. The deal is basically pre-signed. So JD Vance mentioned that President Trump had actually digitally signed the document before it has even been submitted, basically. The other thing that's about it is that nobody really knows at this stage what goes into it, what is going into this deal. Everybody's kind of guessing at this stage.
Okay. I'm going to read what I know about the deal, okay? Goes like this. United States and Iran have agreed to an interim peace agreement and memorandum of understanding, again, understanding, it's not understanding, so it's not plural, to end their recent months-long war. The framework was negotiated with the mediation of Pakistan. Again, that's a very big red flag. Why Pakistan? Why Muslim country has to be? What does a Muslim country what does it have to be a mediator? And features the following core elements. So we have here end of hostilities. The agreement establishes a 60-day ceasefire. Ceasefire, the word is problematic because after the cease, there is a fire, like we say in Israel. So it establishes a 60-day ceasefire and paves the way for a formal signing ceremony in Switzerland. Number 2, reopening shipping routes. The U.S. will begin dismantling its naval blockade on Iranian ports. In exchange, Iran will clean mines in the Strait of Hormuz and reopen the vital trade waterway. Now, here's a thought. What happens if one mine or a few mines are deliberately there? What happens if they blow off like, whoop, mistake. It happened, right? You have to think what the Muslims are thinking. About the nuclear negotiations, the fate of Iran's nuclear program and highly enriched uranium stockpile is not finalized. The two sides have 60 days of ongoing talks to dismantle the stockpile, though U.S. and Iranian accounts regarding the timeline for sanctions relief and the unfreezing of assets vary. As we know, what President Trump signed, he was only signing their side, the American side, and which is also not good because when you have an agreement, I think both sides should actually sign on the same contract. And the last clause is investment funds. This is very problematic, very. I'm going to read it. Discussions have explored the potential for a $300 billion investment fund for Iran, conditional on the country's adherence to the agreement's terms. So basically, it's all for Iran, according to this, what we know now. So where is the bringing them back to the Stone Age? If you give them money, it's not the Stone Age. It's happy hour. So what do you think?
Well, you couldn't have said it better on happy hour. It's definitely not happy hour for Europe and for the West, but it definitely is happy hour for the Iranian IRGC and regime and for the people in general in Iran because they're no different. But it's happy hour because the Iranians get everything they wanted out of this. So the Iranians still obviously control the checkpoint. They control the Strait of Hormuz. You mentioned about a mine and deliberately basically leaving a mine knowingly in the waters there. It's a little bit more simpler than that. Even if they didn't, you've got to wonder to yourself, are there even mines there? Even though they say so, because in reality, the water there is so vast, you don't even need a mine. You could basically just announce that you put mines into that water, and it creates enough of a significant worry for the shipping companies and for the insurance companies. And you could achieve the same thing just with a megaphone. And, you know, I read something about it in the agreement that basically from the moment the MOU is submitted, that basically it kicks off a 60-day period. And then there's it starts off the technical nuclear negotiations with Iran. So basically, the deal is not a deal to finalize anything. It's a deal to bring people to the table to talk. And then the issue with that is that they're saying that the deputy foreign minister of Iran was saying that if America defaults in any way or doesn't fulfill its obligations to the MOU, that Iran reserves the right to walk away at any time. And I think that this is where the major issue is, and this is where you really see what is going on, and that is that Iran has masterfully brought the Americans to the table and not the other way around. Because the Iranians have the leverage. They are saying, we want you to give everything to us, and if you don't give everything to us, what we ask for, we can walk away at any time. And then if America says, sure, then we can go back to war. But again, it's costly to America. And then Iran can pull out the nuclear card of the Strait of Hormuz, and we go round and round and round in circles. So it's literally the Iranians have the leverage in this at the moment. And like you said, you said it was happy hour, and it is. Iranians have got happy hour. I don't know how the Americans could have ever considered doing this. Doesn't make sense to me. And then as far as the Stone Age, well, there's talk that Iran is tying its electrical grid into that of Qatar. This is a country that they're attacked. And, they didn't attack the country. They were targeting American bases there. And we can get into this later, but basically you don't go to a country who you just attacked and go and connect your electrical grid into theirs, because technically you were an enemy not too long ago. And if you did run into a problem, you would think that there would maybe be some kind of infrastructure issues or anything like that between the nations. So the whole thing stinks. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, according to the MOU that President Trump signed, there is nothing which is good, because Lebanon is not included. What I read so far, even though anything can happen, we just know little about what we have, that it was released to the media. Because I think it's impossible that a country has agreement with another country, okay, and involves country like Israel in this agreement. So
well, that's
I would
the craziest
want to see,
part.
yeah, I would want to see the Iranians part, because let me tell you, it's not going to work. You know that.
Well, it can't, because like you said, the most ridiculous aspect of this entire thing is that Israel, it's like you said, memorandum of understanding, singular, and there's no understanding between Israel and the Hezbollah. There's no understanding between Israel and what is going on with the Gazans. The terrorists, all the Gazans are terrorists, and there's no understanding in Judea and Samaria with all of what's going on in places like Jenin, and definitely not with Iran and its proxies. Israel doesn't have an agreement with us. If anything, Israel is being attacked, and they're defending themselves, and then they've basically gone on the offensive and done an incredible job.
Justin, I don't like the word when they're saying we're defending ourselves. Israel has the right to exist.
Of course.
Exclamation mark. Anybody who's going to come after us, he should expect us, bombing back, even worse. This is why on, I think it was on Sunday, if you remember, that we attacked in the Dakhia in Beirut. So Iran didn't like this.
Well,
And
they
this
shouldn't
is
like
why
it.
this
Yeah,
is why I told you after the Tehillim space that, guys were expecting missiles. And then President Trump said that he got in the way and he convinced the Iranians not to attack. Let me tell you, if Iran dares to attack Israel, that'll be the end of it. If it
of
attacks
course.
Israel with a, powerful, more dangerous weapon, that'll be the end of Iran.
I believe so. I believe so. And you ask yourself the question. You said that Trump asked Iran not to attack, but in reality, I think that Trump basically picked up the phone and said to them, what concessions can we give you as the United States so that you can sort of overlook this? Because one of the things that you've seen happening is that he posted this. He literally tweeted this about maybe 2 weeks or so, or a week or so, if I'm not mistaken, where he basically, Iran, like you said, Israel bombed the Dakhia, rightly so. And then Iran launched some missiles. And then Trump put a tweet out and said, all right, Israel, you've shot yours, and Iran, you've shot yours. Now it must stop. So this is like it's like very immature in a way, because it's lives. There's lives at stake here, innocent lives in Israel that are at stake, and it's not a game. You can't just stand like a school teacher and say, okay, now boys, you have to stop. This is not okay, and this is coming. The deal is coming on the back of that sentiment. So you already have the picture being set up. Trump is playing the schoolyard teacher, trying to keep the bully off of the smaller kids. And let me tell you, Israel's no small kid. I think it would be a huge, huge, huge mistake for any one of Israel's enemies to miscalculate. And Omar, I wish in many ways that Israel would just take the gloves off completely and just actually say to the enemies, we've had enough of you for the last, oh my goodness, I don't even know how far you want to go back, because it really, and then just basically finish this. It needs to end. It needs to end with Iran gone. It needs to end with the Lebanese, Hezbollah, with the Gazans, with all of this. They need to just go, because
Now you're talking about Hezbollah, okay? Now the biggest joke is the latest joke that President Trump said, that he wants basically to give the Syrians a Julani, the handsome freaking terrorist guy. Yeah, the handsome guy. That's what he called him. So handsome. I wouldn't touch him with a freaking stick. Anyway, so he wants Al Julani to handle Hezbollah. What the hell that this man is he thinking? I mean, Hezbollah is getting guns and weapons from Syria through convoys from Syria that they are being taken from Iran. So what the hell? So basically, you're letting the cat, keep the cream.
Exactly. But it's really crazy when you look at that picture, because let's say that you hypothetically they do arm the Al Julani's people, and then Al Julani's backed by Turkey and Russia. So you're switching the Hezbollah for Syria being an arm of Turkey, and then basically Turkey's role in the agreement between themselves and saying that they stand with their brothers in Iran. So it's literally Trump is retreating so badly in this that he's actually leaving. He's prepared to let Hezbollah get away without Israel basically doing what they need to do to get rid of the Hezbollah. And he's saying, I'm prepared to get away with a damaged terrorist organization that could be finished if I just gave Israel the support, and I'll replace them with Turkey and push Turkey's border all the way up to the Israeli border. Because
this is what I said before, Justin. Sorry
ridiculous.
for cutting you off.
No,
Remember
it's
what
okay.
I said before for months, and I said Turkey's the next Iran. That's what I said.
Yes, you did.
Because Turkey is backing Julani. If you notice,
100%.
straight after Assad was gone, so Turkey reopened its embassy in Damascus.
Well, like I said, the interesting build-up about this as well is the dynamic between Iran and Turkey that's also coming out. More and more and more, you're seeing this. Originally, maybe some of the listeners don't know the background to this, but basically Russia, Iran, and Turkey were basically being a power play inside of Syria. And basically Russia had the upper hand, and it was using Iran. And Iran had like even a special sort of consulate office type building that was in the palace of Damascus. So they were a guest of Assad. And so long as the Iranian proxy, Hezbollah, and everyone was strong enough, Iran was basically there and basically under the thumb of the Russians. But now with the dynamic that al-Jilani came in there, because the Hezbollah was weakened and Turkey backed Jilani, you have this total switch, and then you have Turkey now basically calling the shots there, and then saying we have brothers in Iran. And that's scary, because the joining of Iran and Turkey together, I can imagine that a damaged Iran would have no problem with talking to Turkey and saying, we can turn Syria and Lebanon into, I know it's always been seen as one front, but it can become a very serious front, and who knows what that's going to mean down the line. I know that Israel's warned to keep an eye on that, especially Turkey, like you said, on. But I don't understand Trump's thinking in this. It's like he could just let Israel have a go at Iran and at Hezbollah and finish them and do what is the right thing, and he could provide them. Imagine if the Americans brought fire to bear off the coast of the Mediterranean of Lebanon and supported Israel in getting rid of the Hezbollah. It would benefit everybody. It would be a benefit to the whole Middle East. And
there is something, the more I think about it, the more we speak, I think more and more, because you have to see the bigger picture, this is geopolitics. Let's assume, okay, because Syria's goal eventually is to take back the Golan Heights, right?
100% yes. I can't imagine anywhere else.
Now they can tell Trump, because we know Trump was bribed. The plane was a bribe. We know that. That was the time that they had their plan. All those Gulf countries, the poor Gulf countries, which, by the way, during the wars, the operations with Iran, they were not bombed that much. The American bases in them were bombed. So let's say they want to get the Golan Heights. Now, how do they're going to get the Golan Heights? Through peace deal. So maybe al-Jilani was coming up with a vicious plan, because he's a freaking terrorist in a suit. Say, okay, I will handle Hezbollah, okay? And then in exchange, maybe Israel will make a deal with us, a peace deal, and we can get the Golan Heights back. Because this is just like what's happening in Gaza. Let's say, that Hamas is not going to disarm. And let's say he does, okay? They're going to change its name. They're going to call it XYZ. So basically, I don't believe any of them. Not to Syria, not to Hezbollah, not even to Lebanon, because Lebanon ceased to be a Christian country. It is a Muslim country. And the fact that back then they had 13 seats in the parliament, in the Lebanese parliaments, and the president himself said nothing. So it means they agree. They want Islam. They want Islam. The Druze people in Lebanon, there are no longer that many Druze there, because they are marrying into Islam. And when you marry into Islam, you cannot keep your faith. So they're very different from the Druze in Syria and Suadia. So you cannot even believe them. You cannot trust them. Sipora, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, it's okay. I'm just listening. I think probably scooping up that uranium is probably I've heard a few people speaking about it in spaces. I've read a few articles about it, and I was reminded of it earlier this evening. That scooping up the uranium is probably going to be something that is going to be it'll be a big setback for Iran, I think.
If I can jump in there and just mention something to Tzipora. But,
yes, you can.
Thank you. But Tzipora, so, the interesting thing that I think could come about in that dynamic is that, so they talk about the enriched uranium, and that it must be uplifted and sort of either given back to America or diluted or something like this. But if you're the Iranians, and I can imagine that they would do this, they would come to the point where they negotiating. Like I said, this MOU kicks off the technical negotiations for everything to do with the nuclear issue and all this type of stuff. And if you were Iran, you would go down the road, and then you would, in some way during that process, when you had your back against the wall, you would basically say to the Americans, well, you bombed our facilities, and you want us to find the uranium. Well, we don't know exactly where it is, so why don't you bring a team, an international team or an American team, and you come help us find it? And then this further delays the entire process. So this is ridiculous. Like, this whole thing just makes absolutely no sense, because the Americans had all the reason to just basically flatten the whole situation and just really dominate the scene. And now
What do
that
you
they've
mean
come,
by flatten the whole situation? What do you mean? What do you mean by flatten it?
well, I mean that they had the opportunity to come before Congress and to rally the Americans and to explain to America that Iran poses a very, very serious, significant threat. It doesn't just, the Americans, I've heard them in spaces and I've heard them discuss and say, even if they were not close to a nuclear weapon, which in fact they were in fact close to creating multiple nuclear weapons. The Americans need to understand that if Iran did get a nuclear weapon, they would not just shoot at Israel, they would shoot into the whole world. And even if they just shot one, you would have a disaster, because you would have something that has happened where a threshold has been crossed. And even if the Americans said, yeah, sure, we don't have to deal with that, it's other people's problem. Well, it's not, because America will have to deal with the economic fallout that comes from that, and you would have difficulties that would basically flow back to the Americans in the street. Because if they complained now that, oh my gosh, the oil is getting expensive and the gas and food and there's shortages and everything just because of what's going on in the Strait, imagine the day that Iran gets just a single nuclear weapon and decides to launch it anywhere in the world. Doesn't have to be at Israel. They just have to launch one, and the whole world turns into something that hasn't happened before. And that kind of instability, Trump could have used that, and it's not a lie. This is fact. And he could have said, they pose such a significant threat. We've seen the advancement in their ballistic missiles. We've seen how accurate they are. We've seen how they work. We've seen the devastation they bring. And so they're not far off. They have a delivery system. Probably the next stage was basically miniaturization, because they would basically build a nuclear weapon, and then the next phase, which North Korea did, is miniaturize, and they would get that technology probably through the North Koreans, because there were North Korean scientists assisting the Iranians with their nuclear program. So, I don't understand the thinking in America. When I say flatten the situation, I mean flatten the situation. I mean, America should have declared war. They should have demanded that NATO came under that war and explained and said, you have a choice. America can now walk off the world stage, and we can become America first and only worry about ourselves, or you can join us and we finish this and we get it done. And we can deal with this and ensure that people's children and their children don't have to live in a world where in 10 years' time or 15 years, and this is also the other thing, is it's the time frame. It only took Iran, I remember Netanyahu's speech in 2013, where he warned about the sunset clauses, he warned about the deal, and then the deal was signed under the JCPOA, and it wasn't even ratified. Iran never signed that deal, so that wasn't even worth the paper it was written on. And then it took them 10 years. And 10 years later, we were in this war. So imagine with what Iran has learned out of this war, and you won't have 10 years before the next incident. So I'm saying the Americans needed to act now.
You're saying 10 years. What does it remind you of?
It's the Hudaybiyah agreement on.
Hudaybiyah, yes. This is their deception, the big deception.
And they're masters at it.
They're masters only if you let them.
Well,
And the
the Israelis
Americans
know this,
they don't know. They don't know. They're so clueless. Sorry. Even the fact that they have in their constitution is this is what's going to bring America down, because how can you sit and have an agreement with an enemy that still chants death to Israel, death to America? This is number one. Number two, agreements, you make deals from position of power. And here it's not a position of power. And giving them another 60 days, it's just basically going to, rearm. Because we saw it last time, not this week. The previous days, we saw that they still have missiles. So this Operation Epic Fury, also with Roaring Lion, before that Rising Lion, the Israeli operations, they had three major goals. Okay, make sure that no nuclear threat, in which uranium is out, and also ballistic missiles threat is gone. Nothing was achieved. Nothing.
And the third point on that was the proxy zone. So it was nuclear, ballistic missiles, and proxies. Yeah. Sorry, I'm sorry to jump in there.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We're brainstorming here. Everything's fine. Poppy, you've been quiet. What do you think?
No, I agree with what you and Justin are assessing the situation, and I love my country. I'm an American. I wish that we weren't doing this, and as soon as President Trump took that gift from Qatar of the jet, I knew we were in trouble, because he's compromised by doing that. I mean, it might be a huge mistake not to accept a gift from a Middle Eastern person. Maybe that would be considered the ultimate the ultimate insult to them. But yeah, President Trump is not looking strong. He's not looking like a winner, which he's obsessed with. He's looking like a loser who is operating from a position of weakness, not strength, weakness. And it's just mind-boggling to me, and terrible for everyone. And one thing that historically that empires do before they fall from greatness, is they withdraw into themselves, because they no longer have either the will or the finances, but more importantly, they lack the willpower to hold their position through strength, and they withdraw in weakness back into their own country, and it leaves a power vacuum. And you know who's going to rush into that power vacuum to fill it. So the whole thing is hugely disappointing. I would like to still be able to hold out some hope that this is a stalling tactic, that President Trump is delaying for time until after the World Cup is over, till after the midterms are decided, and etc. But I have my doubts, because even though midterms are going on from state to state at various times between now and November, because that's a state-run issue at the state level. At the federal level, the Intuit is not until November the 5th. And so that's still a very long time away. And maybe it's a stalling tactic. I would like to still hold out hope for that. But honestly, I don't feel strongly in that direction right now. Justin, did you want to speak?
So Poppy, you mentioned about the plane, and maybe some people are not aware of this as well, but Trump didn't get that. Trump wasn't offered that plane first. The emir, or the person that basically gave him the plane, he had offered and tried to sell this plane to a number of people before, and nobody would take it. And I think it was because of maintenance, or the cost to basically upkeep of their plane. Is an old plane, and it's not really that great. And the fact that Trump took that plane after it had been offered to many other people, it is like a dirty gift, It's like it was cheap, and yet he accepted it, and that also was very, very striking to me that Trump would
It's
have.
a bribe. Justin, it's a bribe.
But even still, with Trump's ego, you wouldn't expect him. You wouldn't expect him to take a gift that has basically been tarnished, so to say. And I know that. I don't know what to even think about that. I just think that Trump is basically, uh, like I said, he should have lobbied the Americans and declared war. And this is, you said, negotiate from a position of power, and he could have done that. So when the Iranians basically shifted from the nuclear and the ballistic missile issue and brought this Strait of Hormuz issue to bear, what Trump should have done to up the power, to up the ante, and to ensure that they maintain the leverage was to declare war, to declare full-on war with Iran, and then start mobilization. And when Iran saw that, Iran would have understood, if America had continued striking and killing the leadership there, and then basically declared war to get ready to bring troops and to bring NATO involved. And, I'm pretty sure that Iran would be thinking a completely different way had they done that, because that was the only next step for them to maintain a position of power in the negotiation. That was Iran basically up the ante with the Strait, and the only thing Trump could do was up the ante by saying, well, Iran, if you want to play that game, we will go to war with you, and we will show you what the mighty American and NATO alliance will do to protect the world and to keep the peace, even if it means we utterly destroy you. And that should have been what happened.
But you have to understand that NATO didn't want to help President Trump.
But I believe again because Trump was not firm enough, because he has leverage over NATO as well. And he should have utilized all his leverage. He shouldn't have allowed the leaders to do that. He could have done a number of things that would have basically brought NATO into question. And maybe some of the leaders might have acted differently. I'm not trying to blame Trump for everything. He's not to blame for this.
No, we're not. We're just basically talking. We love Trump. I was very happy that he was elected. The way I see it, it's not like Venezuela. Okay? And it's far away from the States. It's really far. It's very difficult to bring forces there. What the mistake that we all made, people that thought, or even leaders, that there are people there that really want to free Iran. That was a mistake. Because when you think that, okay, so you try, oh, I'm going to bomb Iran, but not here, not there. But once you realize that 90% of all Iranians living in Iran are Muslims, and they're actually anti-Semitic, like those two Iranians told me on the phone. So it's easy. I would just, if it was for me, I would bomb Iran nonstop, day and night, until I see that there is not even one missile going to Israel.
Well, that's it, Tom. So to keep the maximum pressure on Iran. And you mentioned about it's not Venezuela, it's far away. Yes, it is. And the only way that you can do that, what you are describing, is to do a declaration of war, because then you spin up the logistics lines, and you don't have like convoys or air, I don't know, air bridges bringing stuff in like you saw with this past exchange with Iran, where they bring in and then they use and then they've got to bring more. You would have had a continuous front of America and NATO bringing stuff and establishing them stuff and spinning up factories necessary for production of certain things, and you would have been able to keep that pressure. But you couldn't do that unless you declared war. And you're right, Tom. It's not Venezuela. But the other thing is that you mentioned that Trump didn't, when he saw the people, and it's the people didn't come out. Well, I keep coming back to something that I've been mentioning to people. What Ukraine was for Russia is what Iran is to America. When Russia invaded Ukraine, they believed that there were Russian-speaking people in the Donbass and in the Donetsk areas that wanted Russian liberation, and that the moment the Russians walked in there, that these people would basically jump ship and join them, and some did, but not significant to the satisfaction of the Russians. And this is the same thing that happened with the Americans. The difference is that where Russia has basically entered this into a war of attrition and agreed to it, the Americans slid into a war of attrition with Iran and then retreated from it with a deal. This is why, look at the difference. There's a stark contrast here. There's such a similarity in what happened, but the difference is that Russia wants to basically throw men in there and keep it burning because it burns NATO on the slow burn. And America, instead of bringing more power and correcting the issue, America's retreating from it with a deal, with a piece of paper. And that's what you hear Trump even saying about Russia and Ukraine. And, you know, they've got to sign a deal, they've got to sign a deal. This whole concept of the West about signing deals is like totally mind-boggling. It's like, it doesn't make sense, because I know that people don't want to defend their countries, they don't want to fight, they don't want to do anything because we love our lives, we love the peace that we have. But that peace is going to soon disappear. Maybe we can start bringing that into the conversation at this stage on the Islamic threat, about that peace disappearing, where the people, if they don't want to fight the wars that they need to fight, they're going to find the wars right on their doorstep, and they're going to lose because they didn't do enough.
Yeah, this is why New York is gone.
I need to add that President Trump lacks the popularity or the goodwill, or even for someone to, he could not have declared war, because to do so requires a super majority in Congress to vote in favor of the president's recommendation for war. Not just one or two over half, but like 3/4 of the Congress would have to stand behind him. And that's not ever going to happen, because there's a huge number of people in this country who are representing states, but they don't care about America. In fact, they hate and despise America. And they're representing us in Congress, and they would not vote for President Trump. And you saw what happened when we were moving our troops and materiel over to the Middle East, over near Iran. Countries like England and France, that have been our allies since before we were a nation, well, not the English, we were fighting them, but who have been our greatest allies, wouldn't even let us fly over their countries. I mean, if they haven't abdicated their responsibility as far as NATO is concerned, I don't know what else they would have to do. I guess attack us physically, for anyone to believe that they're no longer our allies. NATO's a lost cause.
I think it's lost cause only with the current leaders. I think that you have the left-wing leaders in Europe, and they hate their own cultures, they hate their own countries, they hate their own people, and they hate Trump so much that they would literally see their own countries burn to the ground.
Yeah, I think you're
God
right. I
forbid.
think if they got, sorry to cut you off, if they got proper government back there, and frankly, not have it all run out of some ugly building in Brussels, some cheap building in Brussels, but if people actually got their nations back and got a little bit of pride, well, their leaders reflected their pride. I think this is a big problem that for Europe, that, you know, everyone went very Canadian, went very Trudeau, went very post-national. Oh, we don't need borders. We're all one big global. No. We have distinct identities, and we have things that we love, and culture, and, you know, what is there to fight for? If there is, say, you know, an invasion of Mohammedans and all that kind of stuff, who's gonna go fight it? If we're all just one big thing, one big nebulous thing. But most British young men wouldn't join the army today. It's just so deflating. So I think you're right, Justin. I do apologize. You're probably on a roll there, and I knocked you off just to agree with you, which was a bit rude. But I feel very strongly about this. That they've got to get rid of the NGOs, the Quongos, oh God, that terrible European Union, and just get everyone back into their own nations with agreements, sure, but not have everything run out of Brussels, and that awful Ursula, what's her name, and oh God, so yeah, so that we get a strong NATO again. Europe needs it, really, really do. That really, really do. It's pathetic how they are.
There is a report, I'm just reading the news, that United States denied an Israeli request to go through the deals, the what's going to happen with the agreement. So we asked to check the agreement, and we were denied.
Well, that's the most disgusting thing ever.
Yeah, but we
Yeah.
are going to stay in Lebanon. That's for sure. We have to.
Well, this is why I say, if you look at this, the memorandum of understanding, again, it kicks off a 60-day technical period of negotiations, of further negotiations, ironing out what is to come, what is exactly going to be in the agreement, or at least in the final agreement. And that's ridiculous, because how long does it take to get to a final agreement? If you add up the time that it took Obama to negotiate, and then it took Biden to negotiate, and they didn't negotiate, they gave them $150 billion. And then under this agreement, Trump gives them $300 billion, so double that. And you can't exclude Israel from this. It's the most ludicrous thing ever to expect the Israelis to just sit still and let the Hezbollah and let Lebanon and Syria and all these places just basically ferment and go back to what it was at the beginning of all of this. I'm glad that Israel is staying there, but I'm also wondering, I can already see it coming, where there's going to be an exchange again, because Israel has to, because the Hezbollah is going to fire. There's no ways that they're going to not, because they cannot. They are evil, and they only want one thing, and that's to see the Jewish state be crushed, and that's never going to happen. But because they will do this, the Iranians will immediately jump in and use that as a division and create a division between Netanyahu and Trump. And that, again, I can't understand how the average person can see this coming already, and yet Trump is going to allow it to unfold. He's going to allow a division to build between Israel and America. You've got to ask yourself the question, what is his potential plan for that already? I don't know. Maybe he has one, he doesn't have one.
I think he doesn't have good advisors.
I agree with you 100%.
Players. I don't like JD Vance. I think he's danger to the United States. He's like, what do you say? He's a snake. He's a snake. I don't trust him, especially that he gave work to Tucker Carlson's son. Don't like the guy's bully. Kushner also was not very good here, and Witkoff, because they've got business with Qatar. Now, who is going to host? Who's going to pay for the luxurious hotel, the signature and the signing in the Swiss hotel? Do you want to take a guess? What country is going to pay?
Qatar.
Yes.
Exactly. There you have it. And Qatar's
what country
owns Europe.
funds universities in the States to ruin people and bring cuckoo-ness, wokeness? Qatar. So they're all together. Muslims are Muslims.